I'm so tired of all these garden chores, and it's so hot right now. But you're not a quitter, are you? We are mere weeks away from the greatest weather of the year, and what we do now in August determines if our garden produces beautifully and fruitfully all the way through fall into winter, or if we're going to lose the battle to seasonal depression. And on today's video, I'm going to share with you the 5 most important crops that you must plant in August. If you don't plant these, you will seriously regret it later. And stay tuned until the end of the video where I will show you a complete list of all of my favorite seed varieties that I'm starting in August right now. I'll also place direct links down in the video description to all of my favorite products that I use in real life for starting seeds and transplanting them with maximum success. As a point of reference, I live on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, just outside of the Wilmington area. But the truth is, it really doesn't matter where I live because we are all in the heart of the growing season right now. And almost everything I will be featuring in this video is frost and freeze tolerant and can grow deep into fall and winter pretty much everywhere. Instead, I'm going to break all of these things down in 2 different ways. People who get their first frost in October and people who get their first frost in November or December. That way I can give you a little bit more specific instructions that applies to virtually everybody. And obviously, if you don't get frost or freeze, these crops are going to be very easy, and you can continually plant them all throughout the rest of the year. Top 1, brassica transplants. This includes things like bok choy, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, collards, kale, kohlrabi, mustard greens, mizuna, and Romanesco. There's obviously a lot more than one crop right there, but hey, gardening's a buffet. You pick what you want. These brassica transplants should be started indoors in midsummer because it's just too hot and buggy to start them directly in our gardens in early August. We want to transplant them as perfect seedlings when heat and pest pressure declines, but harvest them before the hard freezes become routine. The process is so simple. Fill your seed trays with a basic potting mix labeled either indoor mix or seed starting mix. Then take a chopstick and make a 1/4-inch divot in each seed cell and sow 2 to 3 seeds per cell. We call this process overseeding because seeds don't have 100% germination rates. If more than one seed germinates in a single cell, you can thin them later or separate the seedlings for a free bonus plant. Lightly compact the soil with your finger and gently water the cells in, allowing enough time for the water to absorb into the potting mix. You may want to do this watering in 2 to 3 passes so as not to dislodge the seeds. Your brassica seedlings will be ready to transplant out into your garden in about 4 to 6 weeks from the day you sow that seed. So if you start them in early August, they will be ready to go out into your garden at some point in early to mid-September. And from there, you have some decisions to make. If weather is perfect for them, and if you don't have any insect pests at that point, well, you can just plant them out directly in your garden. If you're still having issues with insect pests, you can do things like build a little PVC hoop house like you see right here and toss some insect netting over them. That will protect them from insects, birds, squirrels, and the like until they become established transplants and they harden off a bit and they are no longer vulnerable. If it's still hot in early to mid-September, like it is where I live here in North Carolina, you can install shade cloth overhead and keep it up above your brassicas to keep them cool until the sun intensity starts to die down a little bit. Or you can just toss it over one of these little PVC hoop houses like you see right here. If you're curious how to build a PVC hoop house like this, I'll link to a video both above and down in the video description. I use them for gardening year-round. You can build them very quickly and cheaply using basic parts. All of your brassicas are very tolerant of frost and freeze, so they are perfect for season extension deep into the fall and even the winter. However, they are more freeze-hardy than they are frost-hardy, meaning if the hard frost forms on top of the vegetation, they will be damaged at much higher temperatures than if you keep them protected from frost formation. So what I recommend doing is if frost and freeze is imminent, you install one of those PVC hoop houses, like I showed you, or get some kind of hoops that you can erect over them. Then install a 1.5 Oz agricultural fabric over them, because that will prevent the hard frost formation on the vegetation. Doing this, I've had my brassicas tolerate temperatures all the way down to slightly below 10 degrees Fahrenheit once they are well established. They are incredibly cold hardy when they are mature, and they are protected from that hard frost and freeze formation. However, your smaller transplants are not going to be nearly as cold hardy, so this is why I recommend you get them out into your garden ahead of time so they can establish and become more mature before the cold sets in. Top 2, peas. This includes shelling peas, snap peas, and snow peas. Peas are fantastic because we can easily and quickly direct sow them out into our gardens. No transplanting needed. What I generally recommend is if you're going to get your first frost or freeze in October, I recommend you direct sowing your peas in ground in the beginning of August. If you don't see frost or freeze until November or December, I recommend you wait until the back half of August. Here where I live on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, we usually get our first frost around November 10th. So I'm going to sow my peas at about August 15th, August 20th, because they will start germinating in about 7 days with full germination in 2 weeks. And I don't really want them to break ground until about September 1st, because that means a lot of the heat is coming down a bit. And you don't want your peas maturing when it's still kind of hot out, because they can be a little bit tough. I want them to mature when the nights are getting very chilly but not yet frosty. Sowing peas is so easy. Take your finger and punch holes 1 in deep in the soil. Space bush or dwarf varieties 2 to 3 in apart, and vining or climbing varieties 4 to 6 in apart. Sow 1 to 2 pea seeds per hole. You can thin them later if need be. Backfill with soil, amend very lightly with an all-purpose organic fertilizer, and then water them in. Peas are nitrogen-fixing legumes, so they should be fertilized sparingly. Keep the area moist until germination. Germination should begin around 7 days with full germination in about 2 weeks. Having perfect peas revolves around 2 different things: timing and protection. Now, I already explained to you the timing. I want you to time your peas so you are picking your pea pods before you're going to get your first frost or freeze, because while pea plants themselves are actually quite frost and freeze hardy, the pods are not. And if frost forms on them, or if they freeze through, they could fracture and ruin the fruit. So for that reason, if you are going to get a frost or freeze, you need to cover them with a frost blanket or an agricultural fabric, and that will prevent damage. So if you mistime things and you're going to get a frost or freeze, don't worry. You can protect them with a cover, and they should do pretty well if you're on top of things. The other problem that people have when it comes to growing peas is they have the young plants being picked off by things like birds or squirrels. So when you sow your peas and they first begin germinating, I strongly recommend you cover them with insect netting. That will keep the birds and squirrels and other pests off of them. Let them grow to be at least 6 in tall or so, maybe even a little bit larger, because once they get to a large enough size, they will no longer be vulnerable by those critters. If you follow those 2 methods of protection, well, you are pretty much almost guaranteed to have a healthy pea harvest. If you're enjoying this video so far, would you please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting the like button, and leaving a comment down in the comment section? YouTube changed their algorithm this year to promote shorts a lot more. So it's been really hard for us long-format content creators to find new audiences and interacting with videos like that by leaving comments, liking, and subscribing goes miles to spread it around the platform. It's also been hard competing with all of this AI slop, and I'm a real human being working human hours here. Your support would be greatly appreciated if you could do those things. Thank you so much. Top 3 warm season lettuces, romaine types. This is my favorite time of year to grow romaine lettuce because it is a vastly better fall crop than it is a spring crop, because it doesn't really like it when temperatures flare up big time in the summer, but it actually really likes the really cool temperature decay that happens in fall. You get these gorgeous, big, dark green, lush heads, and when your romaine lettuce matures in the cool weather, it is so much sweeter than when it matures in high heat. If you've ever had romaine lettuce that tastes a little bit bitter, that is because it is maturing when it is way too hot out. When it matures in the fall, it can stand in your garden for a very long period of time, as long as you keep the hard frost and freezes off of it. And that's the real trick to growing romaine. You see, a lot of lettuces are very frost and freeze tolerant, but romaine does not do well when it gets directly frosted on. Even a light frost, if it's too prolonged, can damage the edges of the heads of lettuce, and a hard frost and freeze can absolutely decimate your crop. But if you install an agricultural fabric on top of the romaine, it will keep the hard frost and freezes off of the heads of lettuce. And even if it gets very cold at night and you get a hard freeze, well, that frost formation failing to form will actually protect the heads, and they can take it pretty cold down to about 27 degrees with a cover over it, and they won't see any damage. At least that's what I've had happen here in my garden. So my general recommendation is to start your romaine seeds indoors when it's otherwise still too hot outside in the summer, because they take about 4 to 6 weeks to germinate and grow into mature transplants. Then you will plant them outside in your garden when it is still warm, but by far the worst of the summer heat is over. And you want to harvest them just before your first frost date. But if you're a little bit late, or if your first frost comes early, again, you can keep them protected underneath a row cover, and that will keep them standing out in your garden for probably about another 4 to 6 weeks with that protection. Sowing lettuce is so easy. Just like with our brassicas, we will take a chopstick and make a 1-4 in divot in the potting mix. Then sow 3 to 4 seeds per seed cell to account for spotty germination, because lettuce seeds aren't the greatest when it comes to reliable germination. Then lightly compact the soil with your finger and gently water in the potting mix in 2 to 3 gentle passes, being careful not to dislodge the seed. Germination begins in 5 to 7 days, with full germination occurring sometime around 2 weeks. As is the common theme in this video, if your romaine seedlings are ready for transplant too early, or you're just having an unusually warm late summer, early fall, start them underneath shade cloth either aerially or toss them on top of some PVC hoops to give them a little bit of protection. If it's still a little buggy out, but it's not super hot, you can use insect netting instead, just to keep the bugs, the birds, the squirrels, and other things off of your transplants until they become big and established and those pest pressures go away. And of course, if you're going to get an early frost or freeze, cover them with the agricultural fabric. Top 4, cucumbers and zucchini. Now is the perfect time to sow your last wave of cucumbers and zucchini for the season. And if you think this can't be done, I'm here to tell you, you're probably wrong. Cucumbers and zucchini are 2 of the fastest growing warm weather crops in our summer gardens. They germinate in as little as 3 to 4 days, and then they start producing their first fruits in as little as 40 days after germination. So if you sow a seed directly today, you can expect to be harvesting off of those plants in as little as 5 to 6 weeks. So, a seed sown August 1st can give you food as early as September 7th to 15th, depending on the variety. My original planting of cucumbers and zucchini are all long dead, but I grow 3 to 4 waves of cucumbers and zucchini every single year. These are transplants that I just put out 3 weeks ago, and they are already 3 or 4 feet long, and I've already picked some fruits off of them. That's right, these cucumber vines have only been out in my garden for about 3 weeks, and look at all of the fruits forming on them. I've already harvested 2 cucumbers off of these vines, and there are plenty more where that came from. Look at all those little baby cucumbers forming on there. Is that not remarkable? My initial zucchini plants are long dead. This is the only kind of survivor, but I need to rip that ugly thing out because I have these 2 beautiful plants starting to produce right behind it. So this one was transplanted out only 3 weeks ago, and it's already starting to flower. At least it's producing some male flowers. And then this one right here is only a 2-week-old transplant. It was transplanted out 2 weeks ago. They just grow like weeds. What's beautiful about this process is our soil is nice and warm right now, so our cucumbers and zucchini can be directly sown. Just take your finger, punch a hole about 1 inch deep, sow a seed or 2 if you want to overseed, and they should germinate in as little as 3 to 4 days. If you don't see frost until October, you can still start another planting of cucumbers and zucchini directly out in your garden right now. And if you don't see frost until November or December, like I do, well, there's probably enough time for 2 more waves of cucumbers and zucchini. I have those waves out there right now. I'll probably sow more in a week or 2. I might even sow more in another 4 weeks. You can plant new waves of cucumbers and zucchini out in your garden every 4 to 6 weeks if you want to, because they grow so quickly. And if you've never grown a late summer planting of cucumbers and zucchini, you are about to just have your life changed, because the plantings of cucumbers and zucchini we put out in our gardens in spring get harassed with all sorts of pests, squash bugs, vine borers, cucumber beetles. They are brutal. Well, now that we have moved into the back half of summer, you're going to find that most locations don't have any generations of vine borers remaining, so you won't have to deal with the vine borers. And chances are the cucumber beetle pests are over by now, and squash bug pressure is going to be dying down a lot. So you will be able to grow these things out in the garden without all of the problems that we get in late spring and early summer, and you'll get more harvest with less work. I generally recommend that you grow the cucumber and zucchini varieties with the fewest days to maturity possible. There are actually a lot of cucumbers and zucchini that can be found 50 days to maturity or less. The early varieties are better this time of year. However, if all you have is what you have from spring, give it a try. You should still get a harvest. Top 5 onions, zone 7 Pluseau, or carrots and beets, zone 6. Now, to be clear, when I say onions in this context, I'm talking about bulbing onions, not bunching onions that don't form bulbs, and we basically grow for the greenery to harvest as spring onions. They can be grown in most climates 365 days a year. They're heat tolerant and ultra cold hardy. Our bulbing onions, on the other hand, are not quite as cold hardy. I found them here in North Carolina to be extremely cold hardy in my zone 8. We got all the way down to 9.8 degree F last winter and got hammered by ice and snow. And underneath a row cover for protection, none of my bulbing onions took any damage. And they gave me the biggest, earliest onion harvest that I have ever had. I was picking them in late May, early June. So if you live in zone 7 or warmer and you don't really fall into the negatives, you can grow onions all year long. As long as you start them from seed now, you can transplant them out into your garden in late September, early October. That way they can grow and harden off and establish. Then you run that row cover over them to keep the hard frost and freezes off of them, and they should sail through the winter cold. Onion seeds are tiny and prone to washing away in heavy rain, so they should only be started indoors in containers. Lightly sprinkle onion seeds on top of your potting mix and then cover them up with a 1/4 inch more mix. Onions take longer than most seeds to germinate and become large enough to transplant in about 8 to 10 weeks. So don't delay since they take a little extra time. I like sowing mine in large pots because onion seedlings are very tough, and they don't mind being pulled apart and separated for transplanting. If your zone is too cold to grow a bulbing onion and keep it alive throughout the winter, it's the perfect time for you carrots and beets. Now, carrots and beets are cold-hardy root vegetables, and they produce sugars inversely proportional to temperature. That means the colder the temperature is when they reach maturity, the more sugars they will have, but the warmer it is outside, the starchier and the lower in sugar content they will be. That is why I'm not quite yet recommending that growers in warmer, milder zones grow carrots and beets, because you run the risk of them maturing when it's still a little bit warm out, and they won't be as sweet as they can be. You can still start carrots and beets right now in any zone, but keep in mind that you want those cold temperatures to really aid in the sugar development. Beets and carrots are both root crops and should only be directly sown out in our gardens. They should never be started as transplants, because if you try and transplant them, generally they will die. But if they do take, a lot of times they will be deformed and kinked. So, again, only direct sow them. For beet seeds, plant them about 1/2 inch deep and then space them 3 to 4 inches apart, because you want to give enough room for adequate bulbing and not banging into each other. With carrots, you'll want to sow them in long trenches 1/4 inch deep. Overseed the trenches generously because carrot seed germination rates are really poor. If you get an overabundance, you can just thin them later. Keep the area very moist, and you will start to see germination begin in about 7 days with, again, full germination in about 2 weeks. And that right there are 5 of my favorite crops to plant right now in August. I strongly recommend you at the very least plant some of the things in this video, because I'm fairly convinced if you don't, you will regret it later. I know I would. I know so many of us are burnt out right now from gardening in the rain, humidity, thunderstorms, high heat, and we may not want to be out in our garden. But in a matter of 4 or 5 weeks, the weather's going to be cooling off dramatically, the thunderstorms are going to go away, the humidity is going to be decreasing, and we're going to get the most beautiful low humidity blue skies of the year. And we're just going to wish that we had things growing in our garden to spend the time outside, because before we know it, The sunset is going to be happening earlier and earlier, and we're going to start having issues with seasonal depression. Having a garden and things to tend to, I have found is curative at seasonal depression. It cured mine. That was the missing piece of the puzzle for me because I had terrible seasonal affective disorder. Now it's virtually gone. I can't say it'll cure it for everybody, but I can say it definitely can't hurt. And if you're a gardener right now that is watching this and you're saying to yourself, it's too cold in the winters where I live, it's already too late, or it's too hot in the summers where I live, it is way too early. That's just an excuse. And as my buddy said, excuses are just well-planned lies. You don't have to settle for the weather that you have. That's why I use these PVC hoop houses. If all I did was deal with the open sky where I live, I wouldn't be able to grow anything because our winters are way too cold for most things, and our summers are way too hot and wet. But using covers to my advantage, I take much of the weather out of the equation. The agricultural fabrics turn my cold winters into the perfect growing conditions for a lot of these fall and winter crops. And using things like greenhouse covers and shade cloth and insect netting, I can defeat a lot of my summer problems as well. And it has dramatically altered my garden from something that looked terrible come the middle of July to something that now produces 365 days a year. You can do this. Just use the covers to your advantage. And as promised, here is a list of some of my favorite seed varieties for the crops featured in this video. I place links to the seeds down in the video description if you want to purchase them. So everybody, I hope you found this video informational, educational, and inspiring. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And please ring the notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. I placed links in the video description to my favorite seeds and my favorite products that I featured in this video. For everything else I use in real life in my yard and garden, that's linked in my storefront in the video description. And while you're down there, check out my website for all things gardening and custom home design merch if you want to support my channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. Dale's nose is in full drip mode because we are mere feet away from the bunny. The bunny is chilling out, cleaning himself on our walk, and Dale is like, "What's up?" Whoa, that's the shaky cam right there. I didn't think he would do it. We were there for quite a while. Okay, buddy, now that you almost reoriented my front teeth into the back of my head, let's get back on our walk. There's the bunny. The bunny is still there, chilling like a villain. All right, Dale, that's enough. That was fun. We got to see the bunny. You didn't eat at him. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just hanging out, enjoying this beautiful summer evening. So let's get back to the best part of the day, the walk. If this story changes the way you look at the potential of your August garden, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the gardening secrets that others might have overlooked. Let's plant the future together. The next harvest treasure will be revealed soon.